again, official presentations and questions and answers on those topics. The local option tax that we'll be talking about, that's part of the town's budget. So there'll be a chance to talk about that on budget and candidates night, and also at select board meetings between now and then. And then the town charter, similarly, there will be two official public hearings related to the adoption of the charter. The first, I believe, is next week. Mike can speak to that. And there'll be chances for the board to make changes and adjustments to that as well. So what that means overall is that tonight will be relatively fast-paced. There'll be a chance for some question and answer. I'm sure we won't get to everyone's questions. And if we don't, there's plenty more opportunities in the next 6 weeks as we get into town meeting. The official meetings of town meeting are budget and candidates night, which is the Monday, the week before town meeting. This year it's the 26th. And that's right here in this room. Then town meeting Saturday, when we meet in person in the gymnasium here at the school, that's March 2nd. And then town meeting day officially is the first Tuesday, March 5th this year, when we'll be voting and all-day balloting here also at the school. So that's kind of the rough framework for what we're up to. So tonight, because it's informal, there's no voting happening tonight. We're not using Robert's Rules of Order. It's an informal evening. So what we're going to do is go through each section. I'm going to introduce the presenter of the topic. They'll have about 15 minutes to make a presentation. Then we'll have 15 minutes of question and answer. And we'll sort of do it by section and keep moving along. And then the school district bond actually will double the amount of time for that. It's a little bit of a larger process. So we'll extend it for that. But my job is going to be to try and keep things moving tonight. So I encourage our presenters to be brief. I encourage questioners to be concise. And I apologize if I end up moving things along faster than might have been ideal, but I want to make sure we do get to everything tonight at a reasonable hour. Okay. Any questions on that so far? Anybody? When we do get to the question and answer period, please come down to one of these two microphones, introduce yourself, and tell us where you live. And town of Hartford is fine. But it's important to kind of know as part of town meeting who we're hearing from. So be sure to do that. And when the time comes. And also, if you are on the microphones, that means that people who are watching from home can also hear you. So I'll do my best to make sure that everything gets recorded by the microphones. Okay, so we're going to start off. Our first presenter is our fire chief, Scott Cooney, who's going to talk about a proposed bond for renovation of the fire station. So I'll turn it over to you, Chief.
Hope to move this down. Good evening, everybody. It's my privilege to share with you a proposal to renovate the fire station number 2, which is located on Willard Road in Quechee. The language, we've sent this off to the town's bond attorney, and this is the proposed language that will appear on the ballot on voting day. And it reads, shall the general obligation bonds or notes of the town of Hartford in an amount not to exceed $1,300,000.00 be issued under Chapter 53 of Title 24, Vermont Statutes Annotated, payable from net revenues derived from the town's general taxation of real property over a period not to exceed 30 years and subject to reduction by available grants in aid or other funding sources, be issued to finance the cost of constructing certain improvements to its existing fire station number 2, located on Willard Road in Quechee. Over the years, we've seen a progressive increase in the amount of emergency requests for response from the fire department throughout the community, from both fire and EMS services. In a response to that, we also looked at the general response areas that we're responding to, and a physical fire station already existed in the village of Quechee. Quechee also represented some of the furthest response times of the fire department. So in an effort to reduce some of those impact of long response times to individuals in need, we began staffing the Quechee Fire Station in a study fashion in parts of 2021 and then more permanently in 2022. This is the current complement of the fire department that operates 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. There is one shift working in the stations. There are 4 assigned to the main station on the VA Cutoff Road and 2 assigned to the current fire station location in Quechee. Station number 2 was constructed and dedicated back in 1982 by the town, and it operated basically as a garage where a fire apparatus was stored and then call firefighters responded to in that village. That has stopped back in the mid-90s due to lack of call force members, and it's basically just served as an additional storage area for the department. In 21, we added 2 full-time employees to this location and added an ambulance to that location, which didn't have one before. So now it has both fire suppression services and EMS response out of the Quechee station. To allow those employees to work on that site for their 24 hours on duty, we began renting a temporary trailer on the location for them to have their living quarters while sitting standby on duty. The primary fire station you see in white and in blue is where the VA Cutoff Road Station is and services those areas of blue and white. So basically into Wilder and White River Junction. And the Quechee Station you see in the pink red areas services all those areas, basically using Route 14 as the cutoff. We've been working with Estes and Gallup, received a construction management approval from the select board, and we've also been using Studio Nexus planners right here in White River Junction to envision what converting the initial garage fire, the 1982 build fire station, into adding some living quarters to the station. They've encompassed both sides of the building and changing the front entry door to the station. This allows us to then create what was just a fire station garage for 2 units to now give living quarters and office staff to both the fire department and a police officer at that location. An illustrative bond from the Vermont Bond Bank for $1.3 million at a 4% net interest shows payments progressively there on the far right hand of the screen with a total interest over the term of a 20-year note of $567,420. And with that, that is the end of the overview presentation of the Quechee Fire Station build project, and I'll take whatever questions you have, Jack.
Thank you very much, Chief Cooney. Questions on this project? Anybody in the house? If you are watching on Zoom, I think we have the ability as well to take questions, and people in the room would be able to hear that. So I'll keep an eye on the back here in case anybody from alerts me. Okay, great. Thanks very much. Please introduce yourself. Tell us where you live.
Well, Eric Cross. I live in the town of Hartford. Thanks for the presentation, Chief Cooney. The question that I have is regarding the presentation that you did on September, I believe it was 19th, for the select board on the capital improvement planning. The estimate for the renovations for Station 2 in that presentation were $750,000. So somewhere I'm getting confused as to why we're bonding for 1.3 mil, and that was estimated at 750,000. Maybe you could.
So those estimates had changed since that given year. When the town issued the construction management contract, we were working on estimates before then, just directly from the architect's projected value of construction. Once the bids went out for a construction management firm, the firm that got the award, Estes and Gallup, took the conceptual drawings done by Studio Nexus and put the overall project as 1.12 in construction. The remaining balance figures in anticipated overage costs and then other necessary items within the property. So the furnishings, the other things that aren't part of the construction bid.
Okay, so the 750,000 is just obsolete, given.
That is correct.
It's an earlier estimate.
Yes.
Should I reform at the back of the queue, or can I get another quick question?
Sure, go ahead. You are now at the head of the queue again.
Okay. Question about the orientation and the layout of the building, the facility. And there's really two aspects to the question. I'm wondering if either the town or the town's architects or consultants, or whatever, are considering how to lay out the facility in a way that might make it a net zero building at some future point in time, or initially at time of construction. And then the related question about just configuration and space is, if you look at your trend lines and extend those linear trends, which, it's a leap of faith, but if we do that, you've got 3 bunk rooms. At what point will we need a 4th?
Yep.
The town need a 4th, that is.
I might have to go back to my slide for a second.
You bet.
In this case, I don't double broadcast. So that was taken into account, what you just described is the future expansion. So we believe that the current fitness room here could operate as the 4th bedroom. And then if needed, the conference room could be decommissioned and turned into their fitness area.
Okay, so given the potential for those changes, then what do you see as the sort of life of this building? Is it beyond the term of the bond, 21 years?
The plan was for 50.
50 years, okay.
Yes.
Right. And the other question, which I sort of dovetailed in there, is about the orientation of it.
Mhm.
The way it's laid out right now, it doesn't lend itself to, first of all, it doesn't lend itself to a passive solar design. It's not passive solar design. And there's no roof space that's south facing, so you couldn't put solar panels on it either at completion or some point in the future, which seems like a bad direction to go for new construction in this town, or really anywhere. And I'm wondering if other alternatives were considered and rejected, or what that conversation looked like.
No, I would say that we've only gone so far as to develop our budget costs on the concept designs, and no architecturals have been done to date. So this funding would allow us to move to architecturals. The town's environmental sustainability coordinator, Dana Clausen, will be involved in that as we look at what the heating plans are going to be for the building, what the energy impacts of the building are going to be. But that was the intent.
So both of those wings that come out from the garage could have south-facing roof, is what you're saying, potentially?
I wouldn't be able to speak to that. I have to ask architects or planners whether or not that kind of orientation can happen.
Okay, so you're asking us as voters to sort of take a leap of faith and plunking down 1.3 mil on a design that's not really.
No, I would say that this is the design that's necessary for the fire station to function as a location to provide fire and EMS services. If there is a desire by the town, the select board, and the environmental sustainability coordinator to re-envision the current design, that can occur. I think the concept was to design a fire station that's available and effective for response forces to work out of, and that's what this is.
Okay.
If more is to be taken from this project, then it has not been given to me as a project.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chief, why don't you stay right there? That's
Okay.
you stay in the driver's seat. Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself to us.
Thank you, and thank you, Chief. Dennis Brown of Hartford. Can you flip back to the picture facing the complex?
I can. This one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm just curious about this roof design, because it seems to me that this is just going to be a snow problem in the future. I would have thought that the drawing would have gone from the peak all the way out to, well, there's a carport there, but it's just inviting having to clean the roof off, when if you had gone from the peak down to the outer part of these structures, then snow would more likely come off. And it seems like this would just be a maintenance thing that I think we should think about.
No, I'll take that. No, I'll take that back to the architect. That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Yes, next question.
Peter Merrill, Queechee. As a resident in Queechee, it's very, very nice to have you in the town or the village.
Mhm.
And you've been there for a number of years, so I assume you have some statistics on reduced response times, number of rollouts and so forth.
Sure.
That you could give us to sort of provide some justification for this.
Sure, absolutely. So if we're using the 2,500 calls a year annually, Queechee has routinely maintained about the 25% of our total call volume. We've recognized that right along. And as the calls progressively goes up, that 25% holds true. What they were lacking in Queechee was that 70% of what we're doing is EMS calls. That if people calling 911 for a medical emergency. And Queechee had not had an ambulance ever in that location. So we've added that, and that's where we've seen the impact. Some of our furthest response time out of the White River Junction, the via Cutoff Road Station, it takes optimal of 15 minutes to arrive on location in areas of Queechee. We're not cutting that in half. And 7 minute is our standard anyways. And we're hitting that in White River Junction and Wilder and in parts of West Hartford. But Queechee has always been our struggle with doubling that in some of those response areas. So yes, we've seen significant reduction in response time.
Yes, sir. Next question.
Chief Jonathan Rugg, Hartford Village. Thank you for the historical perspective. I didn't realize that there was a facility that had previously, in the 80s been staffed by call staff, you say, and that you couldn't get there was a dearth or a lack of availability of call staff, and that's why we went the direction we went and things have evolved.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if thinking out of the box for budgetary constraints and stuff like that, if that's not worth revisiting from the standpoint of now post-COVID era, we have a lot of people working from home who, basically are working out of home offices in Queechee, and, maybe we go back to the old volunteer fire department or partially volunteer fire department way of thinking, as, so many small towns in Vermont and elsewhere do. To get back to a previous comment, Dennis mentioned the shed roofs off the side. I'm sorry, as a licensed civil structural engineer in Vermont, I'm not worried about the snow loads. Nexus's engineers will be able to deal with that. I'm assuming this is either a robust wood structure or a steel structure. That probably hasn't been decided yet.
I haven't seen architecturals on it yet.
I mean, yes, you're going to get snow shed from the steep middle portion onto the lower portions, but that can be designed into it. What else? I guess that's it. I'm going to sit down.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Other questioners? I'm looking back at our remote folks too. Any questions? Remote, okay, we don't. Yes.
I just want to second the need for net zero building.
Great,
Since
be
since
sure,
this has been, Jeff Arnold, Hartford,
Thanks, Jeff.
because it's one of the high priorities that the town set a while ago, and I think every means should be taken to get as close as net zero as you can. Thanks.
Yep,
Jonathan Rugg again, dovetailing off that comment. Can we go to the plan view? I too am an energy miser and was looking for those R values, but they're cut off from the picture over on the right. I'm hoping we've got more than, our 23 walls, our 15 walls. I see plus signs or what might be plus signs there, but yes, Nexus Studios should be able to give us a design for a very efficient building, and it would be tragic not to design and build to a high energy standard, because energy is never going to be cheap again.
Thank you.
Okay, this is the last chance. Anybody want to ask a question of Chief Cooney at this point? Okay, once again, there will be opportunities as the town meeting cycle continues to have an official, two official hearings on this bond. So there's plenty more chances to weigh in. And I think that is great. Thanks, Chief, for that. I think actually that's my phone. You'll be back. Okay, great. The next topic that we're going to dive into are proposed revisions to the town's charter. And Mike Hoyt, the chair of our select board, is going to give a presentation on that. And then we'll once again have a question and answer period. So Mike, come on up.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out. As you know, I'm sure there's going to be proposed charter changes that are going to be on the ballot this year. So tonight is sort of the first run through to sort of let you know what's being proposed. The board is going to take up the charter on the 23rd, public hearing at our next board meeting, and also on February 6th. At our next board meeting, we have the opportunity to revise some of the language based on what we hear from the public and what we hear from our attorneys about how certain things are phrased. So I will walk you through the proposed changes and then take questions. Okay, so this is the text of the charter. Just to give you sort of a history of this, the Fifth Charter Commission came to the board in December 2022 with their proposals for charter changes. They offered it to us and we accepted these changes as advisory. That was based on the advice of our charter attorney. The board has the specific power under state statute to revise and amend any charter changes that are proposed. So that's what we did on December 12th and December 19th of this year. We, in public, had a hearing on the charter and we made some changes. So if you look at the original proposal from the charter committee, the language has changed in a number of ways that I will go through tonight. So basically, this is what the charter looks like. We included all of the charter. Not every part of the charter is being changed. If there's new material being added, you'll see that it's underlined. If there's material that's being deleted, then you'll see that it's struck through. So I will begin to go through this. The first change is actually right at the bottom, and it's just a clerical change. There's a section on the particular powers of the town, and we just made sure that when it says particular powers, we say of the town, because these are the town's particular powers and not the powers belonging to the school board, which is also mentioned in the charter. So what follows, and this is all sort of existing language till we get to subsection 17, are the particular powers of the town. Now, subsection 17, regulating rental housing with the town, I know that's been a lively topic within town, so I'm happy to address this. When the Charter Commission first came to us, this provision looked quite different. So it included sort of a directive to the board to create an ordinance which would adopt something called just cause eviction. So the board rejected this both on substantive for some of the members and procedural reasons. Mainly because the charter, as you can see, it's a document that tells us what our powers are, what the officers are of the town, their terms, things like that. So putting in a directive that basically tells us as a board to adopt a certain kind of ordinance, it didn't make a lot of sense to us. So we took that out. So just cause eviction is not a part of the current proposal. What we decided on instead was to list basically our existing authority to regulate rental housing. So the town does have some inherent authority to regulate rental housing. Some municipalities have adopted rental registries. The state law specifically gives municipalities the authority to regulate short-term rentals. So I think we're talking about Airbnbs, hotels maybe where you pay by the week, something like that. But there is a limit on that. And I think that's what's been causing some confusion in town and on social media. So as a lot of you know, Hartford is a creature of the state, essentially. What we're allowed to regulate is limited by what the state allows us to do. So the state specifically allows us to regulate short-term rentals. We do not have the power to rewrite state statute. So Vermont has a landlord-tenant set of statutes. It's been in place since 1985, hasn't really changed ever since then. That, you know, basically lays out certain rules of procedure between a landlord and a tenant. So those are already state law. Statutes, you know, they provide guidance on things like if you get an eviction notice, you have a certain number of days to respond, right? We cannot draft an ordinance which changes a 15-day response time to a 45-day response time. We can't override the leases that landlords and tenants enter into, right? So in the end, our actual power is circumscribed by the state. We do have the power to regulate short-term rentals, right? I think what is, you know, something we will talk at our meeting on Tuesday is clarifying this to make clear that we have the authority to regulate rental housing to the extent that's allowed by state law, right? We can't enlarge our own powers. So that's something I think would be helpful. You know, does it really need to be in there? You know, maybe not, but it is nice to point to if a future board ever wanted to, you know, regulate Airbnbs or something like that. Whether it's included or not, the board still has some inherent authority to regulate rental housing. So we're not, you know, we simply do not have the power to you know, to add something like a landlord will pay relocation fees. That's just not possible. So that's what we, in the end of, you know, the real practical effect of this is just to list a power that we already have. So I think there can be some clarification about that. The next item, this is going to be a big one. This is one that we've separated out as a separate ballot item for the town to consider. And this is the local option tax. So the state allows towns to adopt local option taxes on rooms, meals, sale of alcoholic beverages, and a sales tax. So when Hartford adopted its local option tax, it did not include a sales tax. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of, you know, comment on that and why that was, but we're on the border with New Hampshire. They do not have a sales tax, right? So what this provision would do would add a 1% sales tax to goods that are subject to the Vermont sales tax. When this first came up, and it came up fairly recently when we discussed whether we wanted to allow cannabis retailers in town. And the question, do we get to see any revenue from that? In that case, the state does not allow us to enact a tax solely on cannabis revenue. If we want to see any revenue from cannabis, it has to be part of a larger sales tax that you know, basically covers all the goods subject to the Vermont sales tax. The Vermont sales tax does not tax food, clothing, medical devices, over-the-counter prescription pills, things like that. But I do understand that this may be, you know, a hard sell for the town. I think there are arguments for and against this provision, but that's going to be something that, you know, the town will decide on a voting day. So that was basically the impetus for adding something like this. You know, we end up, you know, every year we've got an, you know, people want services, you know, taxes go up, things like that. A more robust local option tax fund, you know, allows us to pay for some things without driving up, you know, the actual property tax increase. But I do understand that having a, you know, a sales tax in the town, a local one, you know, may not find a lot of support with the voters. So we'll see. But that's what that provision is. You'll see it separately on the ballot. The next change, a couple here, nothing really big, but you can see in subsection B1, we have a school in town meeting committee. They set up events like Budget and Candidates Night. They helped set up this and advertise this. So the Warrant Information Night, which is tonight, was never specifically mentioned in the charter. So we just want to add that in there, you know, just because it is something that we do on a fairly regular occasion. So basically, we're just referencing the meeting that we're having tonight, and that, you know, basically the town and school meeting committee is responsible for organizing that. The makeup of the school and town committee, it used to be that the town clerk would appoint one member, the select board appoints two members, and the school board appoints two members. When this was originally enacted, the town clerk was an elected position. Now it's an appointed position. So it was thought that taking away the town clerk's appointment authority would make some sense since they are appointed. You know, we just want to make sure they're not unduly influenced by like the select board. So that would now go down to a four-person committee. The next thing is E1. So this section talks about these meetings, and it's just saying, you know, we have a warrant information night, info night. It's set, at least according to this language, on the first Monday after the first Tuesday of January. I imagine that we may tweak that, you know, just because sometimes when you get too specific on those things, you know, it can cause some issues with the calendar. And the town and school meeting committee may call a meeting. Not shall, they may, because some years there's really nothing for us to talk about, right? We didn't have one last year. It's an info night. Generally, we have things like bonds, charter revisions, stuff like that. So some years there may be one, some years there may not be one. So that's the change there. Into the budget and candidates night meeting, charter specified that that would be at 7 p.m. That was struck just to allow a little more flexibility in scheduling. All right, so our next change, see if there's any on this page. Nothing on this part. So elected officers, and you'll see a change here on E2 and F1. So the idea here is that there's a moderator for the town and the school. That moderator is Chuck, who does a great job. Currently, that's a one-year term. It was decided to change that to 3 because that coincides with other terms of elected office and prevents Chuck from having to go get signatures every single year, which he may or may not appreciate. So that's what that does. The other items, so this page on E, that talks about the presence of members on the select board and what a quorum is. So a quorum is 4 members of the select board that allows us to take action as a board. So what this would do basically is say, suppose you have 4 people at a meeting. The affirmative vote of at least 3 members is necessary to adopt something, to do something. This is an instances, right, where we don't have the full 7. So if you have 4 people, 4 board members, 2 are in favor of an item, 1 is against, and 1 recuses, you know, the idea is that we want at least 3 votes instead of just 2 to pass something. After that, let me see. There's not a whole lot more, I don't believe. So we have this appointed officers provision, 301. And you'll see that there's some changes on this page having to do with the collector of delinquent taxes. Just clarifying that these duties shall be assumed by the town manager or designee, which I believe is the current case, but this would just codify that in the charter. It would also allow the creation of an assistant town treasurer. So this would allow the town treasurer to appoint an assistant treasurer who can be delegated some of the powers of the treasurer on a temporary basis. So the idea here is if the treasurer is out of town, indisposed, something like that, there will be a person who's able to execute the duties of the treasurer in the treasurer's absence. We brought the charter, of course, to the school board on January 10th so that they could weigh in on proposed changes that affect their jurisdiction. They mentioned that currently the town treasurer is the treasurer for both the town and the school district, but there is a possibility that there could be 2 separate people in those positions. So the idea here is that the town treasurer, you know, they can delegate, they can appoint an assistant if they tell the town manager And I think we're going to make a change. So if they tell the town manager and the supervisor of the school district. So that's the assistant town treasurer. After that, I think the last change is here. You see in C where it says rights and privileges. So this was the provision that was put in the charter initially, basically saying if the charter ends up like getting rid of a current position, like an appointed position someone has, they get to keep it till the end of their term, even if that position is not going to exist going forward. I think looking at this now, we are likely to leave this language in because there is the provision where the town clerk loses their ability to appoint a member of the town and school committee. So what this would do essentially, if we adopt the charter, that person who is appointed by the town clerk will be able to serve throughout the entirety of their term and not just be like gone like the day the charter gets approved. So these are the changes to the charter. Like I said, we have 2 more public meetings. This will go to the vote on voting day. If it is passed or parts of it pass, our elected representatives in Montpelier will introduce this charter as a bill. So that bill gets taken up by the legislature. It starts in the House generally. The House Committee on Government Operations will look at it and they may tweak it. They may change it. They may say this is stupid. We're not going to go ahead with it. Usually the legislature takes up charters and passes them, right? So after we pass it, it's got to go to the House Committee. It's got to pass the House, go to the Senate Committee, pass the Senate, and then go to the governor for approval. So this is a long process. There's no guarantee that if it's passed by the voters, that it will actually end up being enacted into law. So this is just the beginning. And those are the changes. Like I said, we've got meetings coming up Tuesday, 23rd and February 6th as well. So we would really appreciate people sending us comments, suggestions, because this Tuesday meeting is really the last one where we have an opportunity to amend the language. So those are the changes, and turn it to Chuck and answer any questions people might have.
Great, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, sure.
Why don't you stay here at the podium like we did with Chief Cooney? That seems
Yeah,
like
that sounds like the plan.
a good approach. Okay, so we've got some time here. Who has questions? Chairman Hoyt about this proposal.
Yes.
Start here.
Hi, Jeff
Please.
Arnold, Hartford. Since the town already gets the local option tax, why not make the 1% go for the schools so we don't have to, was it a $21 million bond? How much are they asking for?
I will leave that. Yeah,
The
superintendent is shaking his head, nodding his head affirmatively.
Okay, $21 million. So that repairs to the roofs like Dothan Brook could be done with that money. I think you're going to bring in what, $500,000 a year is estimated?
If this is passed, the estimate is somewhere around 650,000. You know, if the tax does have the effect of having people shop elsewhere, who knows if that is the actual number, but yeah, it's not an insignificant sum.
I think the roof at Dothan Brook might be able to be repaired for $650,000. So is there some regulation that this money has to go to the town and not the school system?
So what happens is when the local option tax is collected, it's basically put into a fund.
I'm talking about the new tax.
The new tax would be treated the same way as the current local option tax. So that comes into a fund. We basically propose to the voters, like, you know, we want to pay for the cemeteries with some of this fund. You'll see tonight, Scott Hauser is going to talk about beautification efforts. That's used by local option tax money. Those have to be approved by the voters. Whether we could propose that, you know, this money is earmarked to improve a certain school, I'd have to look, and maybe we'd have to look into it and see, you know, jurisdictionally whether that's something we can do, or if the school board, you know, is sort of siloed with their own budget for something like that. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's a terrible idea. It's just, I think we would have to figure that out. As in this charter, there is no change to the process where it would have to be approved by the voters. And generally the select board says, hey, we ask you to approve $200,000 to pay for the cemeteries or something like that, right? So that's the general process.
Yeah, but it'd be nice if it was specified for the school, like local option tax has always been for town purchases.
Right. And I don't know if we could earmark it for the school, maybe.
Great.
That's something we can look into.
Yeah, that's my recommendation.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah.
Good evening, Tim Ferriero, White River Junction. And thank you for having this night. It's always good to have information. Full disclosure on the front end, I'm adamantly opposed to the local option tax. I was when the initial one was offered, partly because I thought it was segregated to a industry in our town, which works very hard and is somewhat penalized by adding that 1%. One of my idols was a gentleman named Herb Ogden. I don't know if anybody ever knew him. He was from Heartland. And he was kind of an old Vermonter. And one of his views is always keep things local. And the idea is like everything we do with our money, be it going to the Fed, going to the state, the further away it goes, not only does it become less and less efficient, but it also kind of doesn't really come close to home on what we're spending for what we need. And my problem with the local option tax is multi-layered. One is, which I don't know if it's clear to everyone here, is that for every dollar we collect locally, we don't get that dollar back. Montpelier keeps 30 cents. Is that a correct assessment? So we're already like taking something where there's a local dollar and it's becoming 70 cents for Hartford. And to me, that's overhead and that's inefficiency and it's a bad fiscal practice. I think we should be enduring the pain locally of what we spend locally, as odd as that sounds. I know we want the rate to look good. We want to pass budgets, but I think applying a 1% overlay to perhaps the auto dealers on the Hill, a lot of other industries that compete with New Hampshire, I think is really a bad practice. And if you take the money and you put it back in the general fund and you look at the tax rate, it's not big money. These are not big dollars. And if we as a town of Hartford are spending X number of dollars, we should just endure that locally with what we have to endure. So I think philosophically, it doesn't work for me on many levels. And I think it would be helpful if we both looked at the towns that currently have it in place, and we should have a pretty good estimate of what we're anticipating based on current sales that Vermont is collecting. So if we're saying it's $600,000, if we take that 600,000, put it back in the general fund and just eat it on our municipal tax rate, I think you would find for all of us, it's probably 60, 70 bucks on our tax bill. Now, I don't want to spend another $60, but I think that's better than imposing a 1% tax on many, many businesses here that are here at Hartford, work hard, and should not have that overlay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yes, right here.
Thank you again, Dennis Brown, Hartford. I'm going to speak about the sales tax proposal. And so we know there's been a proposal to change the current local option tax from just rooms and meals to include sales tax too. And I have some comments about that. Years ago, when the law was first considered, I had real concerns about it. At first, I thought the information I got that was going to be a sales tax. I contacted the board members, and I think Chuck was the chair then, about that, and told them that I had real concerns about the sales tax, and here's why. I grew up in the outdoor power equipment business, and we were located up on Route 4 towards Quechee. It was Charlie Brown's. It's under new ownership now. But in 1969, Vermont decided to implement the sales tax that we have. And Governor Dean Davis at the time was in charge then. And this tax got named DDT, Dean Davis tax, similarly named after a terrible pesticide. This new 3% sales tax devastated our business. Many of our customers started going to New Hampshire to buy their equipment and parts to avoid paying this tax. White River Junction used to be a thriving retail business community, and most of that is gone or has moved to New Hampshire now. As it was, the select board was just considering a rooms and meals tax back then. So even though I still had concerns about this, it made a little more sense. This was because most of the new revenue would come from tourists who would use our restaurants and hotels. This new sales tax would affect retail businesses that are in town, like auto body, auto repair shops, car parts dealers, frame shops, jewelry and sales, etc. It is very hard to compete with our retailers are placed at an unfair disadvantage while we live in a town that borders New Hampshire that doesn't have any sales tax. When the law was being considered before, many people felt it was going to lead to the town just spending more money. Now that this is being reconsidered to add this as a sales tax, it seems to prove this. And what will be next? I believe this new consideration of adding the sales tax is to enable the state and town to mainly be able to tax the new cannabis businesses. For the life of me, I can't understand why the state just doesn't add this to the current rooms and meals tax that we already have, similar to how alcohol is taxed. We shouldn't add a complete additional sales tax to mainly tax cannabis. People, including me, hate paying any tax, and most people will do anything to avoid being taxed. Many New Hampshire businesses advertise that they are in tax-free New Hampshire to promote their businesses. Just talking about taxes and the concept that if you come to Hartford, you're going to have to pay an additional tax to do business here will drive more patrons away from our town.
Dennis,
I shudder.
Dennis, I want to make sure we get more questions and comments, so please.
I'm almost done.
Great. Thank you, sir.
And thank you for that. I shudder the thought of even talking about taxes like this. It is very damaging to what's left of our retail business community. Please be aware of this and consider not voting this additional tax. It will certainly harm businesses and their ability to pay taxes that we currently enjoy. Having another tax will be very unintended consequences and only encourage more businesses to move to New Hampshire or go out of business. It certainly won't inspire new people to open new businesses in our town. And I'm just curious about board members, the select board members that are proposing this. How many own businesses that this would directly affect? I don't think there's any on the board that this would actually affect. And so what is worse, almost worse than COVID? A tax collector. And that's what you'd be turning our remaining merchants into. So please give some thought to the sales tax before it goes into effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brand. I think we had a question on Zoom. Yes, go ahead and let's see if we can hear that one. Okay, I think we have Marcy Bartlett. Go ahead, Marcy.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Marcy Bartlett from Wilder. I appreciate being able to be here on Zoom. We're all getting over COVID. It's not a whole lot of fun. I want to thank Dennis Brown for his comments, and I want to also echo that I really do not favor a sales tax in our town. And I have watched that same phenomenon in businesses as well. And may I clarify, please, with the moderator, the subjects that are being discussed tonight, is there a potential that certain items would not go on the warrant if the sense was that those particular items were not going to be beneficial? Could you clarify that, please?
Yes, Marcy, the town and school warrants have not been set yet, so that is correct. Anything we hear tonight could be modified or left off. That's certainly true.
Then I would appreciate it if you'd put this item back in Pandora's box before you let it out. Make it go away, please.
Great, thank you, Marcy. We heard you here in the room that the Zoom link worked well.
Thank you.
Go Got a question right here. Yes.
Thank you. Eric Kraus, Hartford. I'm going to skip to the town, or the assistant treasurer, if I may. Question for you on that, Mike. The way it's worded, and I don't mean this question to cast aspersions on the current or past treasurers at all, but I guess the first question would be, are we compensating, would the town be compensating both the assistant and the treasurer simultaneously?
No,
Okay, all right, well then,
that's not the intent.
it's not an issue, but it doesn't read that way.
Yep.
And really the root of the question was, what if I sign up to be treasurer and then take 6 months off and assign an assistant? Can I be collecting my whatever?
Right. So the
modest
intent is
salary.
that they don't get paid at the same time. The intent is that the assistant is paid when they are actually performing a duty, when they've been appointed or essentially delegated the power from the town treasurer. We actually have from our town attorney, I believe, some clarifying language on that. And so Tuesday, like I said, is the time when we can make changes. And so we will put that in and hopefully, it'll read more cleanly after Tuesday.
Okay, thank you. And in section 401, the charter review, item 3.
Oop. Oh, God. Scott? Oh, I hit page down. That was awfully stupid. All right, no, I'm good. Okay, so this was for 401, most miscellaneous. Yep.
401, charter review, item 3, recommendations shall be warned for a vote at the next Australian ballot meeting.
Mhm.
Next referring to, the item before that says the committee shall submit a written report.
Yep.
So it seems to me that procedurally you're not following what the charter says. Maybe I'm reading this wrong.
Yep.
Is it true that you're not actually following procedurally what the charter says?
No, that's not true. This came up when this was first presented to us. And we talked to our charter attorney about this. So the idea is that what the Charter Commission brought to us were not their recommendations, their final recommendations. They were essentially advisory proposals that they gave to us to review. Which we did because we have explicit statutory authority to do that. This provision, I have a tough time believing that this was intended to allow an unelected committee to come up with charter recommendations, give them to the select board, require the select board to have public hearings where people can comment, and we're not allowed to change anything. That's incredibly undemocratic. I'd love a court to look at this because we have explicit statutory authority to amend the charter. And this provision, if read literally, would negate that authority because it would allow an unaccountable committee just to make recommendations that could go directly to the voters. So because of this, our attorney said what you really need to do is treat these as advisory, which the Charter Commission presented to us. They said, these are not our final recommendations. These are advisory. We essentially take ownership of it as a select board, and then we amend it according to our statutory authority to do so.
But that commission presented its recommendations in December of 2022, correct?
Correct. And at that time, we asked them to basically say that they're advisory. This is not their final recommendation. They did that, and then it was us to amend and revise the charter as we did in public hearing. The reason why then we did not proceed immediately is because we did not have a town manager, and we felt like changes like this needed to be looked at by a permanent town manager.
So would this be, I know you want to cut me off, but would this be an opportunity to actually change this language in this section to be something that's more workable in the future, given the immediate past circumstances?
I believe it probably would be. Although, I'll have to talk to the town manager and the attorney. It may be that since we've already sort of voted this out, that if we make any changes, it's to things we've already discussed publicly and that have appeared in the charter. So tweaking language to clarify it. Whether we can just make wholesale changes that have not yet been presented to the public, I think is a question for our charter attorney.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Eric. Yes, sir. Please reintroduce yourself.
Jonathan Rugg, Hartford Village. I want to talk about the proposed sales tax just for a moment, because
Mhm.
in my mind's eye, it's ill-conceived and it's ill-advised, and I feel like it was born out of an intent to tax cannabis, which I am 100% for. But like Dennis says, I can't believe that the state won't allow us to tax a 1% tax on cannabis like we do liquor. And I think we need to get to the state house and to the legislatures and get this resolved, because thanks, yeah.
Yeah. Excuse me, yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. When this first came up, we'd heard noises from Montpelier that they would allow towns to solely tax cannabis, and that went away. And then it was like, we're going to do a revenue sharing program with municipalities that have dispensaries, and that went away. So, if people want to tax that particular activity, basically it's a sales tax on everything. And, this is, it's an up or down vote. It's what people think, I'm not here to advocate for it or defend it.
As I look in the audience, I don't see Esme and I don't see Becca, and I'm wondering, where are our state legislators on this? Because they haven't heard the rally cry, apparently.
Sure. Understood.
Again, Mike, when we were talking about whether we were going to allow cannabis in sales in Hartford, I sat here in this very spot and said, we need to tax it to the maximum that we can. And this came up. But Hartford is in a pretty nice area to garner some revenue from cannabis sales because of the two interstates, the proximity to New Hampshire, which doesn't have retail sales yet.
Yep.
And our tourist traffic with Quechee Lakes and Killington nearby. And it galls me to think that we can't take advantage of that.
Yeah, understood.
Thanks. Yes, question right here.
Hi, Michelle Boleski, White River Junction. So I just want to say, I was on the Charter Committee, and I was on it from April of 22 until September of 22, and I resigned. And I believe it met until November. So how many months is that where they worked on language? So I'm kind of confused how the select board was able to make so many changes in 1 month, December of 2023. That's the first time I saw it on an agenda. Wasn't it brought back up in December of 2023?
It was.
Yeah. And so we met once a week for all those months. And then you guys met how many times to create these changes? So I'm just really concerned about the process. And I think the reason why we have open meetings, we have communication, and we let citizens know, is so they can fully understand the process of government. And I think that didn't happen this past December. And I'm just really concerned about, because I was talking to some of my other committee members who were very confused when I shared with them these new revised charter changes. Anyway, so that's that. And I also, have concerns about the fact that the meeting minutes and agendas weren't posted on our website from June 2022 until the end of December of 2023. There were no meeting agendas. There were no meeting minutes from the Charter Committee. So if anybody wanted to ask questions of the select board, none of that information was posted. It was on the server, but it was not posted underneath the committee, the Charter Committee. I am a small business owner, and I'm still recovering from the COVID pandemic and the effects that it's had on my business. I thought I was going to lose everything. There are still many, many businesses in our town and our state that are recovering from the devastation economically. I am so baffled why you would want to ask them in this town to collect an extra 1% sales tax, put them at a disadvantage, since we are right on the border of the shopping mecca of New Hampshire. And there are also businesses that are still being affected by the flood in July. And so I'm just really disappointed in the select board and the fact that they don't, that's not a concern for them. And that when I listened to the meeting, people were almost gleeful about how much money they were going to bring in.
Great, Michelle, thanks. I want to make sure I get a chance for one more question.
Do I have a chance to respond to that since
Or
there was plenty said about the select board and the process?
Sure.
The proposals for the charter change were made public in December 2022. We took it up in December 23. This was out there a year before we took it up. We had our staff look it over during that time to see if there were any concerns that they had. If you look at the proposal to what we did, it's basically cutting out some stuff. It's not particularly like extensive revision. We did that in December. The vote on this is going to be in March. That's 3 months from when we took it up and made changes to when you get to vote. Also on the sales tax, I'm not here to argue in favor of it or against it. That's something I'm here merely to tell you what this provision does. So, I just want to defend the process that the board took.
Great. So I think as we all expected, this is a topic of much interest in the town. And the next time this will be talked about is next Tuesday at the select board meeting. So if you're watching remotely or here in the room and want to speak to the select board on this topic, next Tuesday is the time to do it. I do see a hand up from someone else on Zoom. This will be the last question on this topic, and then we're going to move along. So who do we have? Okay, Peggy Richardson, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hi, I was just thinking about and commenting on this tax. First of all, it sounds as though the impetus for the tax is to tax cannabis, and that the local sales tax for everybody else is going to be collateral damage, which seems a bit of a peculiar way to do it. And it's hard to imagine. I don't know what the revenue projections are for cannabis sales, but the cannabis would just be such a wonderful windfall that it would make that much difference. And also, it seems quite a lot to lay on when I have read recently that the state cannabis laws are in something of a state of flux, and it may be that the medical dispensaries of cannabis are maybe they're already very impacted by the sales in non-medical dispensaries. You have to go take your cannabis card and go to a dispensary in Windsor in order to get medical cannabis. And if that goes away, the dispensaries are going to be up in arms, and then you won't be able to get the sales tax that you would have gotten if all those people come to the places in Windsor, because people with medical cannabis cards have the exemption from all the sales tax. I don't know if they'd get it from local option tax. And so I've gotten in the weeds, so to speak, and that's it. Thank you. I'm going to be voting against it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Peggy. I appreciate your comment. Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Chuck.
Yep. So once again, this topic will be on the select board agenda for the first hearing, which will be on this coming Tuesday. So if you didn't have a chance to speak, or if you think of a question between now and then, do come on Tuesday to the town hall. Okay, the third of our 4 sections tonight is to look at proposed uses of local option taxes. So this is a little bit of a follow-on on what we were just talking about. The town does have an existing rooms and meals and alcohol tax. And as part of that process, the select board needs to present to the voters how that money is to be allocated in this year's budget. So there's a proposal to use the local option money that we've already received for 3 items So we're going to hear some quick presentations on what's being proposed, and then again, take some questions. So I'll turn it back over to Chief Cooney to talk about the first one.
Okay, the first one is an ambulance purchase request to have some funding for that purchase come out of the local option tax account. The question on the ballot has been approved is, shall the town authorize the expenditure of exactly 200,000 of local option tax revenue funds towards the purchase of an ambulance for the town of Hartford Fire Department as an Australian ballot item? This is to be used for a 2016 Ford F-150 replacement that currently resides at the fire department. And I should clarify that this vehicle has already been ordered by the manufacturer. The cost of emergency and the availability of emergency vehicles has increased and been delayed significantly since COVID and the impacts of the supply chain issues. So the town has actually ordered this replacement ambulance already. And we ordered it in May of 2022, and we still have not taken delivery of it yet, nor has it been constructed yet. So we are setting aside funds to make that purchase. This was the bid that came in when we went out to RFP back in May, as you can see, back in May of 2022. Total cost about 301. That was on a 23 chassis. Now we're looking at a 2024 chassis because they have not arrived yet. So the intent is to use to supplement the purchase of this vehicle by using 200,000 worth of lot funds. And the town does maintain a capital reserve account for the replacement of fire apparatus and ambulances, and to use a portion of that payment to come from the fire and ambulance account.
Okay, great. Actually, I'm going to hold questions here. Let's hear from Scott Hausler, our Director of Parks and Recreation. So thanks, Chief. So Scott will talk about the other two, and then I'll take questions on all three together. Great. Thanks, Scott.
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here to talk about the local options tax proposal to use local options tax for a couple of projects. And the first one we're going to talk about is the Our Villages beautification program. So beautification has been a topic of discussion for several years, working with the Planning and Development Office, Parks and Recreation, local businesses, primarily in the downtown White River Junction area, about doing various things. This year we did add some planters, and I think there's been various projects over the years that have been that have taken place. However, there's been no real program. So what we've been talking about for a long time has gotten to a point where, you know, let's just devise a program, put some money toward it, and let's see how we can make it work for downtown. And it's not just generally downtown. So that's why we're calling it the Our Villages. So it's going to consist of all of the villages as a particular project. There's various near term and long term is what we're calling it projects. So the near term is pretty much now. If you would pass the local options tax of $30,000, the near term was going to take care of determining what this particular project is, and we'll talk about that just real briefly here in a minute. Purchase various planters and materials and supplies, implement the seasonal planting program for year one for the villages, and start talking about sustainability of a program. We don't want to keep coming back to ask for local options tax, right? Well, we want to be able to infuse the money and get a nice little program and project going for the community. Long term, there's several things that can be talked about within a program like this that would be covered throughout the entire villages. You know, gateway signage I don't know how many people come in and out of the community, drive to Woodstock occasionally. Coming into the community, you see all of our old welcome to Hartford community signs. You know, we need some restoration of that. You know, we need to show Hartford that we're welcoming as well as a beautiful community to be in, right? The seasonal light post banner program, potentially the Hometown Hero program could be infused into this as we start talking and implementing this particular program. As you might know, the Hometown Hero program has been funded to start implementing within the community. So there's also talk within the downtown businesses of beautifying the community during various seasons. So the winter season, putting up winter banners, summer season, summer, you know, festival banners, that sort of thing. So implementing that particular program potentially within the Hometown Hero program. That's not part of the lot request, but that's part of the long term as we start thinking about this. Village waypoint signing and maintaining the sustainability program will be something that we want to continue to talk about. So how will it be funded? We're asking for $30,000 to start year one, purchasing the planters, materials and supplies for implementation and funding any kind of labor assigned to doing that. Or a contracted service. We don't exactly know what it is yet, but we know we can implement one of those two. So it's also focusing on the sustainability type of program through sponsorships and fundraising and getting that in place for the second year, and working with downtown departments, businesses, as well as organizations in the community to unify it and make it something that we can all be proud of. What do we get? We get the development of the program that I just kind of talked about. We get year one of planting and downtowns within the villages, whatever that might be. The planning document for the residents to be proud of. They can look at it. They can be a part of it, right? So it's going to be key that we develop some type of working group with all involved to try to create this program or to create the program. You're going to be getting some self-watering containers that hold several gallons of water. So you're not watering them every day, depending on the weather conditions. So it's, you know, one, conserving, you know, staff time and all to implement the program. You're getting the first year and the startup. You know, we're going to have to look at a transportable water tank. You know, that somebody in a staff person will be able to go around to the various villages where these plants are, and in particular White River Junction, where a majority of them probably will be, and staffing contract type of service. This is kind of what those planters look like. Picture one of a self-watering one. It's a wicking system. There were 4 of them, I believe, were put in downtown White River Junction, quite large this past year. That was part of a project that we wanted to try to implement. There's some hanging ones that could be done, or that can be the basic urban vase style that would sit on corners, or in particular gateway areas within the community. I think of heading into West Hartford, you know, maybe near the community center, West Hartford Library, somewhere near the bridge that crosses the river, you know, locations like that could be considered. And then sponsoring equipment, there's a couple pictures there showing some of the equipment that's in the back of the vehicle. The staff member would go around and water, prune, you know, that type of thing. The warrant language will ask for the town to authorize expenditure of $30,000 of local options tax revenue funds towards our village's beautification plan to purchase planters, materials, supplies, and for implementation of such plan for the town of Hartford by Australian ballot voting. And again, specific to year one, the program has, and what I presented to you has some vision within that as we want to make this sustainable for years to come. And then we're going to wait on questions, right?
Yeah, wait until because what is
I got it. So it wasn't quite in order, but that's all right.
Great.
I'll just roll into.
I'm in point.
Yeah. Hey. Now that I got the jitters out for being up on the stage, we'll go into the next one here. You've been such a kind audience. Haven't had any questions yet though, right? So Lyman Point Park project, we presented during the budget process to do some improvements to Lyman Point Park. The select board chose and offered the use of local options tax funds to help us pursue that project. And this is what we've got. First, to start off, our vision and mission statement for Hartford Parks and Recreation has many elements within both that fit this project, not only just as a project, but also we believe it's a key function of local options tax funds and how it can benefit the community. What the Lyman Park Improvement Project is, we currently have funding in reserve accounts for various things. One in particular is for a lot of our playgrounds. This particular playground at Lyman Park is close to 30 years or almost over 30 years of age and has passed its useful life. We're requesting $225,000 of local options tax funds. And then we'll utilize our current reserve account, which is at 100,000 for this project. What do we get? Well, we get a design park complex that is handicap accessible, inclusive for all, and a public space that the entire community can continue to use, it should say. Sorry, I didn't get that in there. Accessible, inclusive playground features. New designs and playground features have changed dramatically over years, right? And so we're looking to enhance our playground and play opportunities at a very popular park here in the community. Covered picnic tables will be scattered throughout the park design, individual covered tables with accessibility to them. It happens to be a very popular park for picnicking. One of the key areas is accessibility to the park and to the play apparatus and everything else the park has to enjoy. There is actually no handicap accessibility to the park now from any sidewalk, and we have a 150 unit residential facility getting built across the street. There's no accessibility into the park. You have to go into the actual parking lot to access the park. So we want to make some improvements there. We also want to make some accessibility improvements from the playground itself to various features in the park, and also connect what we call Lyman East with Lyman West. There's two kind of pieces to the park itself. That safe access is very important. Safety fencing upgrades, various new benches throughout the park. A river overlook, looking over the Connecticut and White River. It's a beautiful area. We're looking at raising the tree canopy and putting a kind of a patio structure with some type of, maybe a cover if we're able to, a little bit of shade, that type of thing, but a destination, a place where people can go, they can relax, they can take in the beauty of the park as well as maybe have a function or something like that. And potential relocation of the existing bandstand. Right now, it backs up against the Connecticut River, or the White River, excuse me. We're looking at relocating that to the east side, east central part of the Lyman Park, which is on the town hall side. Putting it in the center, kind of up against the railroad tracks, opening up the whole park a lot more, but also providing a little more access to, the visual access to the river. This is kind of a sketch of what you get, kind of all those elements that we just talked about. It kind of shows where they might be plotted. This by all means is not what it would look like at all. This is kind of our internal sketches. Part of the project through local options tax will include some architectural renderings And then when we get to kind of the final, what it's all going to be, working with our working group and the community with input, then it'll kind of get on to print. So we really have kind of good idea what we need to do with civil engineering and that type of thing. So we can really finalize exactly what it's going to be. Again, the project's funded through $325,000 project, utilizing $100,000 of reserve account that we have in the bank, and $225,000 of the lot fund. We'll also pursue a variety of grants and provide a variety of funding sources that require elements of your project to already be funded in some capacity. But we feel pretty confident that we'll receive some federal funding, state funding, as well as some private foundation grants for the project. Kind of where we're at right now, real quick. We've been working on this because we do have a reserve account, right? And we have all these projects that we're trying to enhance and improve. So we've been working with the working group as a department, and those particular meetings are ongoing. We've submitted an RFP. It's out right now. We're waiting for those to come in for us to evaluate. Quick little chart kind of showing what we'd hope to see happening, but we're at the phase now waiting for those to come in so we can kind of review and make a decision about where we're going to go with a vendor to finalize exactly what this is all going to be as we work with the community. We would hope to have things in kind of a process really activated throughout the course of the summer, and then potentially in the fall and the winter, be able to do a little bit of the project and then final it up in the summer. There's your language for the warrant, similar to the other one, but we're asking for $225,000. And quick little vote yes, what that all means, but I won't go through that all right now. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
You bet.
Okay, we have some local option tax requests here. Any questions or comments for our two department heads on these proposals? Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, do we use up all the local option tax? Jeff Arnold, Hartford, every year? You don't try to use it up every year?
Or pass the microphone there to the town manager. Great.
It appears that there's like $450,000.
I was going to hand it off to Mike, who has longer institutional memory about how the Hartford has dealt with the lot. But my understanding is no, we don't spend it down to zero.
I don't believe, I'm sorry. No, I don't believe that that's the case, that we spend every last dollar of it. It's in a fund, right, until we expend it. So, some things each year we look at and we think, are there items that we can use lot funds for and put it to the voters. But, I don't think our practice has been to make sure we empty the account each year.
Has the amount been steady at $350,000 a year coming in?
I'd have to go back and look or talk to the town manager. I think certainly it took a dip during COVID because, it's meals, rooms, and alcoholic beverages. But I believe it's rebounded. I think we'd have to look sort of over a longer timeline to see like what its peak was and where it is now. But I mean, it brings in a fairly good amount of money each year.
Yeah, I remember previously, I think it was pretty reliable, 350,000 in that.
I feel like it might be more than that, I'd have to look at what it is, but I feel like it might be a little bit more than that.
As far as the project goes, I hope that there's not too many walkways crisscrossing all that grass and that we still have a lot of grass left. I see there's a lot of walkways going in, right?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, that was kind of our reiteration of how things might flow. You're correct. It'll be an impervious type of probably surface of some sort, maybe a supported surface that actually has grass growing through it. But
really, the grass goes through the walkway.
It'll be
firm enough.
There are some. It's like a honeycomb system. I can't really get into it, but we'll be able to show you.
That'll be
I'll,
nice.
I'll show you at the tree board meeting on Tuesday. How's that?
All right, that got rid of me. Okay.
Scott, you're an ace over there. Yes, next question.
Yeah, Tim Ferriero, White River Junction. I just want to first start off by thanking both Scotts for great presentation. I think the projects are well thought out, and I think they're very much needed in our community. One concern I have around this most recent thing around Lyman Point is, if you recall, with our infamous track and hockey rink fiasco, that you can get certain projects where the soft costs gobble into the hard cost, and then we ended up with not a project. So I just want to caution us to be aware of that and try and, migrate our way through that, where we get the delivery at the other end instead of sort of being short on those funds. As you know, I've been a squeaky wheel for a long time about green space and plantings and so on. Lebanon does a beautiful job in their community with that. I'm a strong advocate for making that a permanent budget item. Yes, we're using this as seed money and shooting for the LOT for funding, but I think we need to make a commitment, and I hope the select board makes a commitment to funding this ongoing, because I think it's a good investment in our community, and it should be everyone should be advocating for this. So thank you both Scotts for great presentations.
I think we may have our finance director on Zoom. Is that correct? Is that Gail? Great. Yeah, Gail, go ahead and introduce yourself again to us.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, yep, you're all set. Go ahead.
Perfect, great. Gail Ostra, Finance Director, Town of Hartford. So regarding the local option tax, we do not draw it down completely because what we do is we do a very conservative budget amount that we are expecting to receive. But what I can do for you at the meeting on the 23rd, I can bring you back the 3 years of our actual numbers and our requests that we've made, and then what the current balance is. But we certainly do not draw it down to zero, because it's a pretty far-fetched to try to figure out what we're going to receive when we don't know. And obviously COVID threw a wrench in everything. So we're just getting back to where we need to be. But if you're at the meeting or you listen to the meeting on Tuesday, I'll have that information for you for the last 3 years. Thank you.
Great, Gail. Thanks very much for that. Other questions and comments for this item, the local option tax?
Jonathan Rugg, Hartford Village. Scott, you mentioned that you're talking about turning the stage towards the town municipal building. Is that correct?
That's the thought, yes, putting it up against
I would caution for acoustical reasons doing that. As I get to the age where I start to lose my hearing, that half a second delay echo is really annoying. And well, speech, one thing, music, another. I just worry about the sound bouncing off the building and going back. It's a hard surface.
Yeah. We'll definitely take a look at that. One of the driving forces towards that is Mr. Briggs. David Briggs has brought that to our attention multiple times. And when we started talking about this project, we said, well, let's take a look at it and let's see if that's something that might be an option. We'll make sure we do address that, because obviously if there's a select board meeting going on a Wednesday night when we have a concert, it could be pretty annoying probably. So, or not annoying.
You're going to have an echo to the concert is what I'm concerned about. Yeah. Second question. You say you've put an RFP out for site assessment. What is that, for landscape planners?
Yeah, so
landscape architect, civil engineer, or something like that?
Exactly. Yep.
There's large, this isn't from a civil scope. This is not a train station or an airport. It's a fairly small civil scope. I would encourage you to look at a free resource vis-a-vis Vermont Technical College or Norwich University students that need their capstone project, where they work together in a collaborative environment and with a professor overseeing their work and stuff like that.
That's a great idea.
On a $300,000 project, it's just a place to push off.
Yep. I appreciate that input. Thank you.
questions or comments on this item? Okay, very good. We're going to move on to the fourth and final part of our agenda tonight, which is to hear from the school board and the superintendent about a proposed bond that will be on the ballot this year for infrastructure repairs from the school. So let's take a couple of minutes here, let these folks get off the stage. Tom or Sarah, if either of you want to come on up, and we'll reset the laptop. So people want to stretch for just a couple of moments, and then we'll resume the action.
Tom, do you want your presentation on here?
It is on here. I don't know if we can just.
Oh, yeah, you can. I'll stick around.
Yes.
There it is. You're good.
That'll make it a little.
Yes, a national transportation. So nationwide, about 105.
I hope it doesn't take that long. I don't plan on being at work forever. I'm just arrows, right?
No, and I don't.
Okay. Are you doing your financial? You're doing your numbers.
Yeah.
I know, but I wouldn't be able to speak as intelligently. I don't think.
Okay, folks. I know we have a couple of side conversations going, but I want to bring the meeting back to order here so we can continue ahead. So we're going to hear from school board members and the superintendent about details of a proposed bond for infrastructure work. So I'll turn it over to Sarah Campbell to get started, and we'll take about a half an hour of presentation. And then once again, we'll have a chance for question and answer.
Excellent. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Campbell. I am White River Junction, and I'm serving out the remainder of Russ North's term on the school board. So you didn't vote for me, but I have been working with the school board since August. So the bond proposal for the school, I'm not going to read every word on these slides because that's kind of hard, but basically the goal is to both backfill some aging infrastructure, things that have not been addressed in the last few years, as well as really looking to the future for the district. A lot of the district growth is going to be around housing and student populations. We have 450,000 square feet of facilities. The codes have changed, the standards have changed, how we're programmatically using those spaces have changed. So the landscape is different, and we are hoping to take this money and move forward with a lot of planning. The bonds we've done in the past have been very targeted towards specific needs at specific locations. Our infrastructure as a whole is aging. I hear a lot of community members say the new schools, and those schools were brought online the year I graduated from high school. So they're 30 some odd years old, and they need just as much attention as our 100-year-old buildings. And we also need to focus on our life safety systems. Our HVAC, our mechanical systems, again, are all aging out, end of life. And then we want to look forward towards our programmatic spaces. What do our arts programs need? What do our academic and athletics programs need? And then what are the community uses? I mean, we are in a district building right now doing a community activity. The sports fields, Parks and Rec works really closely with the school district. So there's lots of community uses of these spaces. Overall planning, I've already mentioned the development in the area. A lot of the new housing units that come on board will affect the White River Junction area more than other villages. So we'd really like to look at a company that will assess our catchment areas, which is, how schools are being used, what school students are being assigned to, and how the school buildings work within the community and how we need to work. We might not end up with the same, 3 elementary schools do these specific grades in these specific spaces. We really want to look at what their long-term goals of these buildings are. We also are looking at a long-term facilities planning project, which would get us 30, 50 years in the future, how our spaces would be utilized, what types of, I've heard people talk about net zero, what type of energy savings that we can have overall. But that again would be work that we would be doing with an RFP process. We also would want to engage the community in all these conversations. So there would be ongoing planning work that would be available to community members, committee members, those kinds of things. I know I'm going kind of fast because I think I'd rather have you guys ask us questions. So the bond proposal process was doing all 3 of those things that I've mentioned, which are long-term planning for our facilities, capital renewal for our existing needs, and then the support and the looking to the future for the long-term district activities and programs. I'm going to let Tom talk about the money because I think he understands it better than I do. Do you have yeah.
This is on. We've done a few bonds in the past. So we go to the municipal bond bank and, at this time right now, $21 million bond, the financing cost over 20 years will be $9 million, $9,165,975. So the total cost is just over $30 million. That could change depending on when we actually take out the bond. So rates right now, I think, are actually going down a little bit. So it could be a little bit better than this. So that's the cost right now. Obviously, we'll have more details on how that affects the budget once we present the budget at the next town meeting.
Thank you. So this is just our summary slide. He just mentioned the 21 million and the 30 million after the 20 years with our annual payment. Jonathan, who's our facilities director, has done an amazing job really bringing all of the items that are needed in our buildings together to give us a really robust estimate and to really bring forward the things that need to be done now versus kind of what our long-term plans are. Roofs, we've talked about the roofs on the 2 elementary schools, stormwater drainage systems, the HVAC infrastructure upgrades, paving, everyone's favorite topic. We're not talking about a track, so we don't have to argue about that. I think that is it. Would be happy to answer questions.
Great, Sarah. Let's keep you here at the podium.
Okay. The hot seat.
Keep you in the hot seat here. Okay, great. Questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dennis Brown of Hartford again. I thank you, school board members and Tom there for presenting all this. I have the highest regard for you folks. But I do have some wonderings here, and I thought maybe I'd ask. So a terrible source to get your information from is the Valley News. So that's all I have here. But so I read about deferred maintenance and I think Tom particularly has done a great job of avoiding putting things off and then paying later. So I was really surprised at that. And then somebody said that not much happened during COVID as far as fixing things. So then I'm thinking, okay, that's a reason to defer. But then I would think the money that was allotted for that would have been saved over that period so that we'd have that now and not have to do this huge bond. So there's one thing. And then I'm also forever puzzled about the roof on Queechee and Wilder, because I think those buildings, if I'm recalling this right, is they weren't built properly to start with and had problems immediately. And the way I understood it is the town saw, I don't know if it was a suit or whatever to get that corrected from the architect or the manufacturer, the builder. And then they got the money, but I'm led to believe that that money was diverted to something else instead of fixing the roof. So now we're fixing roofs again. And so if you could help me with those things, that would be great. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dennis.
I'll start with the maintenance piece. I mean, the cost to upkeep $450,000 of square footage is not covered by a $350,000 operating budget a year. It's just not. And one of the things that the school board has worked over and I'm just speaking from what my citizen perspective at this point, because I was not on those school boards, I did not vote for those budgets, is to keep the tax rate as low as possible while still providing facilities what they need. And they have done that, but at the very base level, right? So that doesn't give you money to replace an elevator or a chimney or to replace a roof. And then again, I don't know the whole history of the roof story, but Dennis is correct. And Tom, you could probably answer that better than I could.
I arrived obviously after those buildings were built. It was 1993 Dothan Brook School, 1994 for Queechee School, and like Dennis said, immediately there were problems. I didn't arrive here until 2011, but I did learn about the lawsuit. We did win the lawsuit, but unfortunately, the school board then and administration spent it on something else. I don't even know what else. Maybe that money, in hindsight, should have been put in the reserve account. But my understanding is that the roof was bad. It needed some fixing, but it probably wasn't bad enough where they felt they should tear it off and rebuild it. So it wasn't the worst decision. Not to defend them, I don't know who it was or who was in charge, but that's sort of my understanding, is that you had a $1 million school with very expensive roof. You weren't just going to tear it off, even though we won a lawsuit saying it was defective, the pitch wasn't correct, the overhang wasn't long enough to shed the building far enough away from the water away from the building. There's multiple issues. That's plagued me in the whole 13 years I've been here, those two roofs. I've dealt with that forever. We've always wanted to replace them and fix them. We've had numerous engineering assessments, architectural drawings of those two roofs. I think finally we're at a place where we know what we want to do, but it's not going to be cheap. The pitched roofs, metal standing seam roofs, really large, a lot of water, a lot of snow. We know what we want to do, but we want to do it right. Part of the problem too, that's sort of come to light recently, partly with COVID, partly with some issues inside the building with ventilation, is that those two buildings have really no active ventilation. So the moisture from the children and the staff, when they're all there during a regular school day, exacerbates the problem with ventilation in the attics and the eaves. And so that's a problem. So it's sort of, as we've studied the roof more, we've learned that we need better ventilation, better HVAC system in both of those buildings so that we don't have the same problem with moisture buildup inside on the underside of the roof, creating corrosion and leakage. So it's a multifaceted situation, those two roofs. So anything else you want to know about the roofs that we but we're committed to fixing them right and as inexpensively as we possibly can, but we don't want to relive this future generations or plague future administrations with the roof issue.
Great, thanks, Tom. Yes, next question.
Yeah, I have to reach up there.
Feel free to tip it down too. Yeah.
Jen Durgan Wilder. I want to thank the select board and the school board for all the service that you do. I have 2 kids, went through Dothan Brook and the middle school, and now we're at the high school. And so I'm very familiar with all these issues. and the need to address them. It, I think especially when families are looking in what town they want to live in, they look at the schools. The thing I'm struggling with is in the Valley News, I think they said that it would increase the property tax for like a $300,000 home by $2,600 per year. Is that accurate? Sounds like a lot.
So please
introduce
probably
yourself,
Peter,
Peter.
sorry, Peter Merrill, school board member and live in Queechee. So it's sort of conflating a couple of different issues, and it probably is worth explaining exactly what we were talking about. They got reported on. So for various reasons, which will come out when we have to explain the budget, this was the perfect bad year in terms of our budget and the effect it was going to have on taxes, mostly having to do with the fact that the grand list has not been reassessed in a very long time. And because of the way the state funds education, that meant there was going to be an absolutely astonishing tax increase. So we were looking for ways to avoid that happening. And one of the ways we could do that is there is an escape clause in the state law, which if we can get the per pupil spending below 10%, increase below 10%, we are eligible to cap our tax increase. Nominally, it's a 5% tax, but when you put in the effects of how they deal with the grand list, it's actually larger. But to do that, we had to get money out of the budget. And all of the work that's being talked about here, or a good portion of it, is stuff that we have to do soon. And some of it is stuff that we have to do really soon. And about $4.5 million of that work is stuff that we will have to do in the next year, just because of regulatory requirements. And so by putting the money into the bond, we're able to reduce the budget because we spread those expenses over 20 years and we've reduced it. So it's actually avoiding increases in the tax rate.
But to clarify Jen's question, so the number printed in the Valley News was not the tax increase related to the bond.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Right.
Follow up, Jen? Or?
A little complicated, but
Yeah. So that increase would be for all.
So there's a very significant tax increase that we just can't avoid. But by using the bond as an element of deferring some of the payments for a 20-year period, we're reducing the impact as much as possible. And so there is a large increase in taxes coming. We will be explaining it once we finalize the budget and present to everybody, but the bond is actually helping reduce that.
Okay, and then just one quick follow-up. So my understanding was that the state, given what you said about keeping it under 9%, is that the state would make up the difference for 1 year. So then what happens in those subsequent years?
My understanding, and I'm hoping for further explanation because I'm not entirely sure how this works. We lock the tax increase for this year, and that limits how much we can increase the taxes for the following year. So it's you get a little, but you pay for it in terms of financial restrictions.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Next question.
Tim Vario, White River Junction, Vermont. I want to start off by saying I respect all the hard work that you guys do in the district. I've been involved with Hartford for a long time, both on the school board, put 2 kids through this wonderful system, and I have a lot to say to praise it. But this seems kind of odd to me, this bond up here. And the reason why is because a couple reasons. Several years ago, I served on a committee of a very divergent group of people looking at our school district and where our kids go to school, how our programs are, and what we should be doing to perhaps save money and be more efficient and deliver our education better. And the committee, after many, many nights, similar to perhaps the charter work, had worked very, very hard to look at the school district and say, you know, what can we do? And we kind of came up with an idea. And when we came up with that idea, we presented it to the chair for consideration, and we were effectively turned down. And I think the main reason we were turned down for consideration on our ideas was because it was a political third rail. It was definitely as we know, in Hartford, we're very proud of our 3 separate elementary schools and our middle school and our high school and what we have in our communities, and that's great. But we really had an opportunity at that time to modify the schools in a way that I think would have saved a tremendous amount of money. And I think it would have utilized our facilities much better. I'm bringing this up only because this feels a little backward to me. And I'm not saying there hasn't been work done, and you may have greater clarity on how that 21 million breaks out. That is to say the roof costs this and this costs this. And I'm not even saying that these needs aren't in our district and need to be dealt with. What I'm saying is that it seems like the mentioning of the idea of studying the district in terms of our program delivery and what we do and how we do it, we really should be doing that work first. Because if we go around and spend X number of dollars on Aquechee or Dothan, and all those needs are, again, legitimate, and then we decide that we're going to change the use of the schools, or we decide one school building needs a little more space or whatever, it's going to dramatically change this situation. So we're locking down on a 20-year bond for 21 million. What if effectively Hartford actually needs 40 million over that time to get the programs right and to deliver our education in a way that's more effective? So I'm just really concerned that we're kind of like locking down on money that, for me, right at this moment as a citizen, is somewhat ill-defined as to how it's going to actually be spent. And we're also doing that before we've done a detailed study of what's changed in education, what we fundamentally need long-term over a 5, 10, or 15-year period. So it just strikes me as we would benefit by waiting. And, you know, yes, if there's some emergency or urgent matter, let's bite the bullet and pay for it if it's 5 million or whatever. But the idea of locking down on 21 million does not seem sensible to me, or the process of studying and thinking in greater depth to that before we commit to that money. Thank you.
So I appreciate that, Tim. A big portion of this money is those studies. So using resources, sorry, I'm not coming up with the word. A firm that specializes in catchment and distribution studies is part of the money that's in the breakdown for this bond, where we're going to experts and including the community on that usage, how that usage would be. And then the facilities portion of that RFP work would be on, again, we've decided what our catchments are going to be. We've thought about usage. Now, how do we improve and sustain our facilities towards those ends? So both of those study pieces would work together to get to exactly what you're describing. That work needs to start now. So that's why that's money is part of this bond. And then I'm not sure who mentioned it, but there's a good portion of these funds that are regulatory driven. So if we decide not to take up the bond, there is between $4 and $6 million worth of work that must happen in our schools this year. Life safety measures, sprinkler upgrades. I already mentioned the chimney at the middle school and the elevator at the middle school. So there's a lot of work that we need to do. Oh, sorry, was someone, what? This is an entire district. The bond is for the entire district.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I'm sorry. So what we are trying not to do is create an operational budget that we cannot afford. And so a $7 million add onto the operational budget in an already taxed year that Peter just described would be unsustainable for the district. But some of the things, the choices we have to make are keeping a school open type of choices. So that's.
I totally respect that. I just think the clarification of, like, you know, you go into the booth to vote for this and like, well, a study, like it needs to be defined better. It's kind of like, I have my own house and my house needs a roof, it needs windows, it needs painting. But every year I have to like incrementally say, okay, like this year it's $10,000 or some number. To me, this is sort of like 21 million. Well, how? You say a study. I mean, Hartford's been burned several times by not doing a good process, doing a clear study and thinking the thing out. It just strikes me that I know you have needs. I totally get it. And if there's urgent needs, then present those as urgent needs. And if they cost 5 million, it's 5 million. But to do 21 million and sort of say, well, yeah, we're going to do a study and we think we're going to do that roof and whatever, it feels vague to me. Right. As it's
There is a
presented.
very detailed, in our school board meetings, there's a very detailed breakdown of kind of line items of each one of these things. And I'm assuming we can pull them forward when we do the budget description.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And so, yes, I appreciate that as a project manager, like that's my meat and potatoes. And I've sat with this committee, the finance committee, separate from the school board committee, to walk through all of those dollar items. And so yes, that list exists.
Thank you.
I don't see any new questioners. I'm happy to continue with existing ones. Yeah.
Again, Jen Durgan from Wilder. Just an idea, would it make sense to kind of break down the numbers and like take out an ad in the Valley News to say like, this is what's coming up on the ballot and like, here's how the 20 million breaks down roughly. I think that would do a lot more than telling people like, oh, you can go to the school board meeting. Cause like,
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be dismissive.
It's like very hard to access the information. And then you get there on ballot day and you're like, I don't know.
There is a detailed, I have it tonight. There's a very detailed accounting of the $21 million. I think what's different about this bond than any other bond we've done, and what I really like about the way we've approached this is, yes, we know very specific things that we need to do. We need to do, and we have needed to do, the chimney at the middle school. It's a $675,000 chimney. Yeah. So rather than jump and ask you for $675,000 next year, do it the way it is for 3 oil-fired furnaces and be locked in to 3 oil-fired furnaces for the next 30 years. We want to say, we need a chimney. We're going to do it. But when we do it, we want to know what that building's going to be used for in the near future, and the options for the chimney rebuild. Like, can we use propane? Can we use it for other things than just oil-fired furnaces? Yeah. So we're trying to be like super thoughtful and do that work up front, but also we know it needs to be done immediately. It's had a major crack in it. It's too small for the furnaces that are there. We can only run 1 furnace at a time because of the backdraft. So we're being much more thoughtful actually than we've been with a lot of other projects. And rather than just fund, schools and municipalities tend to fund what's in kind. Everything's in kind with what you have. And we know that this community is really committed to, net zero, saving on energy, but also saving on emissions. And schools are, our schools are huge, and they're old, and they're all fired with, oil. We have one wood chip furnace, so we're trying to be super thoughtful about the future, but we also know that chimney's got to be done.
But are there like buckets that you could group everything together? So say like we need 10 million for immediate improvements to like roofs, heating systems, whatever. And then like another bucket that's for like future plans, and just so like people could see the breakdown at a macro level, instead of a finely detailed one. So
yeah,
I think that would be a good use of money to purchase an ad.
Interesting. Thank you.
Good idea. Thanks. Other questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Hi, Jeff Arnold, Hartford. So was it around 2012 that we had the engineering study, that huge engineering study, which included the roofs, right? Yeah. So do we have to spend again for another engineering group to?
This isn't an engineering study. This is more of a demographic and enrollment study. Where is the new development, and what is the best use of the facilities that we have? is every elementary school, should it be pre-K 5 like it is now? Or should there be a pre-K 3 and then, 4 through 6 go somewhere else? Like really being detailed about what's the best use of the existing facilities. So we're prepared for the future. We have over 300 units being built in Hartford.
Right, but can't the superintendent of schools herself and the principals figure that out on their own? You need to spend $500,000. How much is the study going to cost?
We haven't priced the study, but
So we have right now, part of this is a $250,000 for catchment specific, hiring a firm to do that work that specializes in school building use. And then we want to do the second study on once we have that detailed demographic, a second study on how our buildings can be applied to that plan so that we are making, again, thoughtful, oil choices, thoughtful energy choices, thoughtful, like if we're going to make this school have a different use, then maybe we shouldn't put a playground on it because we're going to, you know what I'm saying? So part of that is a long-term plan on how we will use them. Highland Avenue frontage needs a lot of thought. We have aging houses, a house that's not in use at all on that frontage. So we have this amazing piece of like community facing property that the school district owns that is being underutilized. So these kinds of conversations are how do we take what we have, utilize it to the best of our ability, and then upkeep it as we go. Does that make sense? Does that help?
and plan for the
And plan for the future. Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like a lot to pay experts, but when we have a lot of expertise existing, but yeah, anyway. So you said that what is the fixed cost we have now in bonds that you have? Have any been paid off recently?
None have been paid off recently.
And
I did
so what
not
are
bring
your
that
fixed
sheet
costs?
tonight, but it is part of the town report. So it's part of every past town report.
Right.
And yeah, it's available on the school board page.
So I mean, how many bonds do you have that you're paying off right now?
Yeah, I don't know off the
How many
top of my
millions of
head,
dollars? Quite a few.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Other questions or comments on this item? Maybe Sarah, you can tell us what's the process for this? Are you having another school board meeting or?
We have more detail. We have another school board meeting. We have more detail at the budget night. If we can provide more information at that point if people are interested. I don't know. I'm gonna look to you guys for like process.
Yeah, we'll have at least 2 more hearings, formally, but I would imagine, as in years past, we've discussed it at every school board meeting from now until town meeting day. But I do have more detail tonight if you want the breakdown of $21 million.
Okay, great. Okay, yes. Mr. Ferriel.
This perhaps is off topic, but I watched your school board meeting the other night and I understand your dilemma, but I'm exceedingly frustrated with that from the perspective of the state, the town, and the school. We've known for a long time that school funding is indexed with the common level appraisal. We've known in this town for a long time that our CLA continues to slip. It was 85%, and it was 77%, and now it's 66%. I heard a comment the other night saying that the town really didn't necessarily or wasn't feeling feet to the fire around a reassessment because at the end of the day, they have to generate $6.5 million and it's a grand list and it kind of doesn't matter to them per se. Well, it does matter because it's affected the school budget every year we've stood here. And we collectively should be going to Montpelier and saying they need to reformat and redesign how we fund schools in this state. And we as a town need to commit to getting that CLA back up whatever way we can. If we have to, I know it's hard to get people to do this assessment, but we've known this for several years. And I'm very frustrated that this town has not acted upon that and turned this thing around.
I could respond to that.
Yes, town manager.
just today I was talking with the town's assessor, Rick Vincent. And just today we were looking at the contract that we have received from our selected revaluation firm. And that process is going to begin in these next 2 or 3 months and will result in a new overall revaluation next year. So the process has already begun on revaluation.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
No.
Okay, I think we've run our course here on this evening's meeting. I thank everybody for coming, especially want to thank our elected leaders and our professional staff for their time tonight. So once again, there are bond hearings coming up. There are school board meetings, select board meetings, and then we will reconvene as a town. Our next town meeting in this cycle will be on February 26th, the last Monday of February, and we'll go from there. So thanks everybody for coming tonight.
It is. Awesome.